the Christian Circle podcast, and you're listening to Pamela Fernandes, where we have conversations about Christian living. Here's the show.
Hello, I'm Charles Johnston. I am a Catholic convert, a writer, blogger, and I guess now public speaker. I've been Catholic for a few years now, and my website is nowthatI'mCatholic.com, and I recently published my first book called The Beauty of the Mass, Exploring the Central Act of Catholic Worship. And it's kind of an exploratory look at the Mass.
Okay, and this book, we're actually giving out a copy of this book for our May anniversary, and somehow we've not had any people sign up for our giveaway. So this giveaway is going to be on Charles' website, it's going to be on my website, and if you want a free copy of Charles' book, you can sign up for a giveaway. It's a raffle draw, and one lucky person is going to get a ton of books from Charles and a host of other Catholic authors and Christian authors. So what are we talking about today, Charles?
Today we're going to be talking about the Stations of the Cross.
Okay, and
very traditional Lenten devotion.
Yeah, it's also called the Via Dolorosa, isn't it?
The Via Dolorosa, yeah. That's actually the name of the street in Jerusalem that the actual stations took place on. It means the way of sorrow. Dolorosa means sorrow.
Okay.
In Latin.
Okay. And this devotion was started, it started with the Franciscan fathers, has it not?
Yeah, actually, there's evidence that in the earliest days of Christendom, before Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, so back when Jerusalem was under Roman occupation still, Christian pilgrims would kind of mark the locations. It wasn't the same, because right now we have 14 stations. Back then they had, they would start at the Antonia Fortress. Sometimes they'd start at the gate where Jesus would have been brought in from Caiaphas' house. And they'd start at the gate there by kind of where he got judged by Pilate, and then walk towards Calvary, where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is now. They'd actually start at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I got it backwards, and they'd go backwards towards Pilate's house. And there was like 5 or 6 stops, and St. Jerome actually wrote about it, that there was people while he was there translating the Vulgate in because it was kind of an underground practice before Christianity was legalized in 315 or 313, and St. Jerome was there in the early 5th century, and he wrote about it. There was Christian pilgrims kind of doing this out on the street, and then the Franciscans, when they came, they really kind of took it and they made it go viral, as we say today.
So they've taken this and they started using this in Italy and all these other churches. And just to let people know, how do you identify a church as Catholic? Every Catholic church has the Stations of the Cross pasted on the wall or in some form or the other, which identifies as a Catholic. So what are these stations one by one of the cross, all the 14, if you can tell them?
Kind of run through them?
Yeah, run through them.
The traditional ones would be, the first station would be Jesus was condemned to death. So this would be at the Praetorium, where Pilate sat in judgment, where Pilate washed his hands and tried getting out of condemning Jesus. But, and a lot of people kind of feel sympathetic for Pilate. I used to always feel kind of sympathetic.
Yeah, me too.
Him, but he knew this man that was standing before him was innocent. And to hold on to power, because the Jews basically, the Caiaphas and Annas had threatened them, kind of blackmail that we'll revolt, and then you'll be no friend of Rome, because they knew he was kind of on a short leash, because there'd been kind of trouble there over the last few years. And he knew he was on kind of a short leash by Caesar. So when they threatened to kind of have a little bit of public insurrection, he would rather put an innocent man to death, who he knew 100% done nothing wrong, rather than risk losing power. So that's a pretty big act of cowardice, if you ask me. And I used to be sympathetic towards Pilate, but then I seen him in a new light, So that's the first station. And then the second station is Jesus is given his cross, is where he's handed the cross, and this really recalls the sacrifice of Isaac, when Abraham took Isaac up the mountain, because normally the animal that's to be sacrificed doesn't carry its own means of sacrifice. So when Isaac carried the wood up the mountain, that would be kind of off book. That wouldn't have been the normal way to do things. You don't make the lamb carry its own wood.
Yeah.
And so Isaac carried the wood up the Mount Moriah, which would have been the same mountain here that Jesus is climbing to be killed. It was all the same, all the same mountain. And so Jesus is given his cross. The third station is Jesus falls for the first time. He falls under the weight of the cross and gets back up, because by this point he's been beaten half to death.
Yeah.
Because Pilate tried, before Pilate gave up to have him killed, he tried to have him just scourged. And scourging was a pretty serious, lots of people would die days later from scourging, from loss of blood and stuff.
Yeah.
So Jesus falls the first time, and then the fourth station is Jesus meets his mother.
Yeah.
And this, for me, was, I watched...
The Passion?
I watched the Passion, last year, and I hadn't seen it it had been a few years since I'd seen it.
Yeah.
And I watched it with my wife and my daughter, who was 8 at the time, and she cried.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why I thought it would, like, she was old enough, basically, and she cried really bad the whole movie. And she actually had to get up and leave before we even got to this point.
Okay.
And when Jesus fell, and Mary, the Blessed Mother, looks at him, and she sees him, but she sees a toddler Jesus. She sees this is her baby, this is her child, and it struck me the first time I seen the movie. I was like 16 years old, and it struck me then, a sad moment. Everyone's got a mother, so everyone can relate with that. But now as a parent, that one scene hit me so hard like a ton of bricks that I started crying harder than my daughter. And I don't cry during movies at all, so this was a rarity for me. But it was just. I identified with Mary in a way there that I never identified with her before. Even though I'm not a mother, I'm a parent, and I thought of my kids and fallen at a tender age. And here she is, because she was told by the prophet when they presented Jesus in the temple. When Jesus was 8 days old, they presented him in the temple, and the prophet held Jesus, the prophet, and said, "Simeon." And he said, "A sword too will pierce your heart." And this was the sword piercing Mary's heart. Was watching her baby walk up to his own execution.
And he's innocent.
And then
that's the thing.
And
she knows.
Innocent. He's done nothing wrong. Because basically what they get him on, that's why they kind of shuffle him back and forth between Herod and Pilate. Jesus had done nothing wrong, is they were trying to find a way to kill him. And what Caiaphas finally settled on, because they had a bunch of different. They had people testifying against them, but in a Jewish court, the testimonies have to match, any court. But it has to be at least 2 testimonies. For someone to be sentenced to death, there has to be 2 matching testimonies. And everyone was saying, like, he done this and he done that, like Monty Python. He turned me into a newt. They were accusing him of all kinds of stuff, and nothing was matching until 2 people said that he said he was going to destroy the temple, because Jesus had said, destroy this temple. He didn't say he was going to destroy Solomon's temple or Herod's temple. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. And the temple he was talking about was his own body, is what it says in John. But they said basically destroy the temple, and that's what they got him on. That was kind of the charge they brought him up on. And then that's why Pilate said, well, what is that to us? We're the Romans. You know what I mean? Like, what's that got to do with me? I don't care if he destroys your temple. And they said, well, if he's no friend to us, he's no friend to Caesar. And basically they use that against him. They use that Pilate's insecurity about being stripped of his power, and then what was that? The 4th station we were talking about, right?
So the
5th
station is Simon of Cyrene carries the cross, and this was another powerful moment in the Passion, where the man standing with his daughter, and he wanted to make sure that the soldiers knew. He kept saying, "I'm innocent, I'm innocent," because he was scared, basically, of getting to the top of the hill and then crucify the wrong person, which probably could happen pretty easily, but. What really, he's protesting his innocence. But Jesus never did open his mouth. It says in Isaiah 53 that like a lamb led to the slaughter, he went quietly and he opened not his mouth. So here's this man, Simon the Cyrene, who might have been he's usually depicted as somewhat of a righteous person, and he helped Jesus up the mountain with his cross, but he was a sinner. And we're all sinners. And he's protesting his innocence. Well, meanwhile, the only person, that has never sinned, Jesus, like us in all ways but sin, the perfect, he isn't protesting his innocence. So I thought that was a real stark contrast there between Simon and Jesus. And then the 6th station is Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. And this one was also in the Passion.
Yeah.
The woman comes up and she wiped his face. And that name, Veronica, means true image. Veritas and ikonos, it means true image. And that she wiped his face just as an act of kindness towards Jesus. Because he would have been a mess. I mean, the way we see a crucifixion nowadays, I've got a crucifix on my neck right now. And even images and paintings, it's sanitized. The worst crucifixion you've ever seen is a sanitized version of. I went in Jerusalem. There's a hotel in Jerusalem called the Notre Dame Center, and it used to be a convent, and now it's actually owned by the Vatican, and it's got a chapel inside it. It's a beautiful hotel. And it's right across from the old city, and they have attached to it. They have a Shroud of Turin Center, and so you can go and it's the whole history of the Shroud of Turin. And when you get to the very end of it, and the priest that took us through it, Father Kelly's from Ireland, he kind of does like a devil's advocate type thing, like where he lays out the case against the shroud as you're looking at all the evidence for it, And he takes you through. It takes about an hour, and when he gets to the end, he shows you, and they took the shroud and they made a 3D image of a body, of what the body would have looked like that was wrapped in the shroud. And the wounds is just from literally the soles of his feet to the top of his head is just covered in lacerations and punctures and scuffs and just terrible. And here's this man laying with this peaceful look on his face, and it's Jesus' body. And then he tells you, at the end, like, now make up your mind. Do you think this is the real shroud or it isn't? He doesn't kind of lead you to a conclusion one way or the other, but he presents all the evidence. I really love the way he done it. And just looking at this body, and it's a bloody pulp, like this person was beat to death, basically. Like, if it wasn't for the crucifixion killing him, he'd have died just from the beating. It's kind of miraculous that he made it up the mountain.
I know.
So that was Veronica wiped his face. So right after that is the seventh station. Jesus falls for the second time. And like I said, I mean, think of this person that's been beat. Literally, and just chunks of flesh. They flayed him with they had a certain kind of whip called the cat of nine tails. And it had pieces of metal and bone at the end of it. And when they would hit you, when they would stick into your skin, they'd pull chunks of flesh off. Like, this isn't even just like in the Navy kind of whippings from the 1800s. This would do damage, like stuff you wouldn't recover from. And so when you think about the beating he took, and you think about how much blood he would have lost by this point, it really is miraculous that he's made it this far. And now he isn't even carrying the cross; he's just walking. But it's still, if you've ever been to Jerusalem, it's it's a good enough grade from the Antonio Fortress to where Calvary would be. It's uphill all the way. It's up a mountain. And they're just walking up this hill that I was kind of out of breath, not being beat, not carrying a cross. And here's Jesus doing all this, and like you said, he's done nothing wrong. This is all for our benefit. This isn't for himself he's doing this. And then Jesus meets the daughters of Jerusalem. And this one really stands out to me too, because he looks at the women and he says, "Oh, oh women of Jerusalem." I'm paraphrasing here. I don't know what the exact scripture it is, but he looks at the women of Jerusalem and he says, "Weep not for me, but weep for your own children." And if you think about it, if these women are all there, and these women are, imagine these women's like 30 or 40 years old, they'd have children that were young enough, like little kids standing at their feet. And he says, "Weep not for me, but weep for your own children." Right? Jesus died, this is 30 AD, and 70 AD, so 40 years later, all these young children that these women would have had would have been around fighting age men. And they would have been slaughtered by General Titus when he came to the city and slaved it to waste, killed everyone in the city. So that's Jesus is talking about their children. Like, don't weep for me, weep for your own children, because Jesus, when he looked at them, when he was doing the Olivet Discourse, he looked at the city of Jerusalem and said, "I wish to gather you in like a hen under my wings, but the time's coming where not one stone will stand on top of another, because you knew not the time of your visitation." Because they rejected them, the whole temple's going to be destroyed, the whole city's going to be destroyed. And so that's what Jesus was saying to the women of Jerusalem.
And generation after generation has suffered, whether it's been in the same country or in different countries. It's like they have suffered and suffered and suffered.
I feel like it's really like an attack of the devil on them, you know?
Yeah.
Because no matter where they go and what they do, it's like there's somebody always attempting to wipe out the Jews.
Mm.
You know, if you look throughout history.
I know, yeah.
And whether from, Egypt to Haman in
Yeah.
Persia, they just celebrated Purim a couple days ago. Egypt, you got the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians. Then the Greeks came through, and Antioch Epiphanes, he tried doing it. You have the Romans, General Titus. Then you have all the way up until Hitler. There's always someone trying to kill the Jews.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's terrible. But I really feel like it is a spiritual warfare type thing. There's a reason that the devil's doing this. Like I don't think it would be possible for just by human nature, someone took it up their back that bad to try to kill one certain group of people. You know?
Yeah.
Like, just think about how they've been targeted by everyone. Everywhere they go, they're targeted by these people, by all different types of people in all different generations. Like you said, they're targeted. So, it's terrible. So where were we? Ninth station. Jesus falls the third time. So Jesus falls one more time. And, just imagine falling on cobblestone streets, first off, will be extremely painful.
Yeah.
And then imagine how beaten and bruised you are, and now you're falling to your knees. Just the pain of that, just that alone. And then having to get back up and not get back up, okay, now we're going to take you home.
Yeah.
You're getting back up to continue on to where you're going to be killed in a way that's so painful that we have a word. Excruciating means to be crucified. That's how painful a crucifixion is. Yeah. So he's down, and it's not like get up and I'll take you for an ice cream cone and we can go home. It's get up until we continue on this death march and we put you out of your misery. But before that, you're going to hang on a cross in excruciating pain for 3 hours. Yeah. So there's no light at the end of the tunnel at this point.
Yeah. And I think it's the early afternoon when this starts, right? When he starts making his journey all the way.
Well, they would have started. Yeah, I think they started. I want to say it was around 9 a.m. when he was sentenced to death, or when he started getting scourged and stuff. But yeah, it was like a 2 or 3 hour long process getting up to Calvary.
Yeah. I
can't remember the exact time. I have to look that up. But there was, it was around 9 a.m. that they started the march up towards Calvary. And then it was 12 when he was nailed to the cross. Yeah. Traditionally, this is.
Yeah.
It was 12 he was nailed to the cross, and then it was, I believe it was 3 o'clock when he died.
Yeah.
I agree. His last would be in John. Right, let me see.
Yeah, because I think before the sun sets, they wanted to bury him at that hour. Yeah.
They took him down before the sun set because it was the next day, because it was Friday. He was crucified on Friday.
Yes.
And the next day was
the Sabbath.
Not just a Sabbath though, but it was a Sabbath during Passover.
Passover, yeah.
Yeah. So the next day he had to come down from the cross. They couldn't leave him up overnight. Because normally they would just leave the bodies up overnight on the cross.
Yeah.
And then would take them down and just throw them to the dogs. And the dogs would eat them outside the city. So that was the way they usually treated the bodies. So for Jesus to be took down and to be given a proper burial was rare.
Yeah.
Because generally people that were crucified were criminals, and the Romans wouldn't let them have their bodies back.
Yeah.
It was kind of like an extra punishment that your family doesn't even get to give you a proper burial.
Yeah.
And then, so the 10th station, Jesus is stripped of his garments. And now, if you go to Jerusalem, you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there's a staircase on the outside of it, and it goes up to Calvary. Because the way you get to where the site of the crucifixion is, you go inside the church. There's a stairway up inside the church, but on the outside of the church, if you ever see a picture of it, there's a stairway on the outside, and there's like a little cupola, kind of like a small chapel kind of coming off the side. And that's where Jesus was stripped of his clothing. Okay. That would have been a hillside, when they were there, just to give people kind of a visual of it. And then the 11th station, so they strip Jesus of his garments. That is 10. Yeah. They strip Jesus of his garments, and they gamble for his clothes. That's a fulfillment of Psalms 22, where, the psalm that he actually quotes from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me, is a quote from Psalm 22. And in that it says they take my clothes and they divide them among them and they gamble for my clothes. And also they take he had a seamless garment on underneath it, which would have been like a priestly vestment.
Yeah.
and they took that off him, and they gambled, they divided his clothes, but they gambled for that to cast lots to see who would get that, because it was too valuable to break up,
Yeah.
to cut into pieces. So that was station number 10. And then station 11, Jesus is nailed to the cross. And I think of, these wouldn't have been modern day, very pointy, galvanized nails that go into wood really easy.
Yeah.
The
crude
these would have
ones.
been big, heavy iron spikes that weren't very sharp in the end.
Mm.
So it would take a lot of force. Like, have you ever seen like a railroad spike? It kind of comes like a chiseled point, but it's not really sharp.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of force to drive it through wood. And so just imagine that going through his hand. It would have been, like I said, excruciating. I can't even imagine what the pain was like to feel that. The 12th station, Jesus dies on the cross. And usually when you're doing Stations of the Cross, you're going through the church. At this point, usually everyone kneels.
Yeah. And stops.
There's a moment of silence.
Yeah.
Yeah. The candles get blown out. Kind of a moment of silence. And then there's the 13th station. This is where Joseph of Arimathea went and got permission from Pilate to take down his body, because it was preparation day for the Sabbath. And they took down his body and they anointed it and prepared it for burial. And then the final station is Jesus is laid in the tomb.
Okay. Now, all of these stations are basically, they're kind of reflective of life in general. And, whether it's falling down and picking yourself up, or, meeting your mother, being stripped of your garments. So all of this is abstract in a way of life. So why do we do them, and what do we learn from them?
I never really considered the abstract of life part. That's really deep. Never really thought of that one before. But I mean, the reason I've always thought of for doing the Stations of the Cross was just to really, because you think about Jesus being crucified and that Jesus died for your sins, like, okay, and Jesus was crucified, and you think about that for just, it's kind of a passing thing. But when you do the Stations of the Cross, it takes 20 to 40 minutes to actually do each station. And then usually a lot of the churches I've been to that do them, they'll read kind of like Jesus falls for the first time, and then the leader will say, "We praise you, O Christ, we adore you, O Christ, and we praise you because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world."
Yeah.
And then there's usually like a short reflection read, and then they sing a song. Short, not a long song, but just kind of a song. And so they do that at each station. And at the 12th station, like I said, everyone kneels, there's a moment of silence. So it takes a good 30, 40 minutes to do the Stations of the Cross. So you're reflecting on the passion and death of Jesus and what it means to you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
For 30 to 40 minutes. So it's a lot longer than like I said, people say like, "Oh, Jesus died for your sins," and you think about it for a minute, and then you continue on with your life.
Yeah.
But by doing the Station of the Cross, you're forcing yourself to take that time. It takes at least 30 minutes.
Yeah.
To really focus on the pain and the sorrow and the anguish and all of the human, because Jesus, fully God, fully man. He's not half God, half man.
Yeah.
He is 100% man with all that comes attached to that, all the temptations, all the distractions that are possible that he just puts out of his mind, all these different things.
Yeah.
And he has a fully human will too, united with his divine nature and divine will, all in one person. So Jesus is fully man, so he's experiencing this. It isn't just like, because it's easy to think of it like a god, like a Greek god, like where they don't really feel pain. Like you can shoot them and they don't bleed. No, Jesus is really, truly human. And he is suffering. And he's going through not just the physical pain, but the emotional pain. Imagine thinking like all of your friends left. Only John, his mother, John's mother, and Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
They're the only people there with him.
Yeah.
Everyone else is gone. So the abandonment of all your friends, everyone's left you. The betrayal that one of your closest friends was the one who, and even right up to the very end, Jesus looks at Judas and he says, "Friend." He calls him friend. You betray the Son of Man with a kiss. He was giving him an out right there at the end.
Yeah.
Like Judas, you're not a robot. You're not pre-programmed. Like you aren't fated to do this. You're choosing to do this. And just all of that. And so that's what I think is the most valuable thing about the Station of the Cross is you take the 30 to 40 minutes it takes to do it, and you really think about all that, and you really reflect on it, and you really kind of dive deep into the passion of Christ.
So you've almost explained how to pray them, and I know that in a number of people that I've met have actually been doing Stations of the Cross outside of Lent for, piety, or for praying for holy priests, or offering up one intention with it. So what do you suggest people should do when they're praying their own Stations of the Cross, whether alone or with the church?
Right. Yeah, I've actually got, I can't remember where it was, a priest gave me to do the Station of the Cross as a penance one time.
Wow,
And
that's
I was
long.
like, yeah, it wasn't Lent, and it wasn't even a Friday.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. And so I went, and I wasn't really sure exactly how, because it, usually when you're doing it with a group, they have the little booklets.
Yeah.
And I was just winging it. Totally winging it. So I went around the church, and I would just stop in front of each, because to be the Station of the Cross, it has to be a cross.
Yeah.
All it really requires is a cross, and it can be just a cross, 14 crosses around the sanctuary.
Yeah.
Or usually it has a number, and a lot of times it'll have kind of a little scene depicting what's happening. You know?
Yeah.
And this particular church I was in, the scenes were kind of, I don't know what you'd say, abstract. It was like Jesus, and then in front of it was kind of like a different, like an artist's take on what's going on.
Okay.
So I didn't know where I was. So I'm walking around, and I'm like, I think this is number 5, because there was no numbers. And I prayed, we adore you, Christ, and we praise you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world.
Yeah.
I believe this is the 5th station, Lord, and if it is, I think this is where you fell. So I butchered it. But, yeah, I do enjoy doing the Stations of the Cross. You don't even have to do them in a church. You can do them at home.
Yeah.
You can just pray them at home. And, there's an indulgence attached to it, doing it at a church, moving from station to station. But, apart from the indulgence, it's really not any less beneficial to do it at home. You can just get a little booklet, or the Laudate app has Stations of the Cross.
Yeah.
And you can read each reflection on each spot, and you can read, the little prayer that goes with it. And after each, I like to read the prayer, read the kind of reflection, and then stop and just kind of meditate, I guess you would say. I don't really say that word very often, so I seen Father Leo paddling like yesterday, and he said he was going to meditate, and that's really Catholic code for take a nap. So he said he was going to pray to Our Lady of the Pillows.
Okay.
But so yeah, I guess you meditate. You read the little prayer, read the reflection, and then just kind of think about. Kind of just close your eyes and think about that particular station and what would have been going through Jesus' mind. Kind of like a modified Lectio Divina.
Yes.
Like, put yourself there at the scene and think about it. Like, think about it from Jesus' perspective, what would have been going through his mind, and then think of yourself as a witness.
Yes.
Standing there watching it, and what would go through your mind if you were the one watching it. And then even think about it from the Blessed Mother's perspective, too. She was there the whole way.
Yeah.
And what was going through her mind,
Yeah.
And then spend like 5 minutes on each station. So 14 stations times 5, what is that? Like an hour and a half. You can go through it. You can go through it a lot quicker than that. But I like to really take my time with it.
Yeah. And it's a good point that you made, being a witness, because I think all of us would identify with somebody who's at the Stations of the Cross. So we could be Simon, we could be Veronica, we could be the Daughters of Jerusalem, we could be any one of those characters, or even a grieving mother.
Yeah, we could be the bad thief too.
Yeah, that's true.
Hopefully, we want to be the good thief. But sometimes we could be the bad thief.
Yeah, so it's good to reflect in that sense, and definitely reflecting on Mary's role, because I think at some point all of us go through grief, and I think some people lose members of their family through a battery or the worst possible death that you could imagine. I think Mary has seen it all, so you can always identify with Mary no matter what is happening, in your life.
Yeah, I told you, I identified her with her in a way that I never had before.
Yeah.
Because, and up until that point, I had always seen Mary as more like women identify with her more than men,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like Saint Jose Maria Escriva. He really identified with the Blessed Mother.
Yes.
And there's actually a few priests I know whose I don't know if their middle name or if it's like their confirmation, but they go by like with middle name Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And So then I got thinking about it. I was like, I guess it isn't that weird that I'm so identifying with her in this moment, because she's a mother, I'm a father, so that's
Yeah.
not the same thing. But I could see through her eyes how painful that would be to watch your child die like that.
Yeah.
For anyone to watch your child
I
die would be a
know,
hard
yeah.
thing. But to watch your child be, like parents that have kids that die in car accidents or die of cancer, all these
Yeah.
different things, that would be difficult. I
Yeah.
don't want to ever know what that feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to watch your child be slowly put to death over the
Yeah.
course of several hours,
Yeah.
like the whole day, just
Yeah.
non-stop, that would be, I can't
Horrific.
even imagine,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's where I identified with her the most, was at that moment, thinking that, imagine the pain that she was going through. The sword was piercing her heart,
Yeah.
And
you mentioned indulgences, so can you tell people? I know a lot of people won't even know what an indulgence is. So can you just give a brief explanation of what an indulgence is and
a brief run through an indulgence,
and
this
what?
won't cause any problems.
Yeah, it won't something that won't confuse anybody. And then,
Right.
what is the indulgence that you get from doing the Stations of the Cross?
Okay, so an indulgence, basically, because the church was given the power of the keys and the power to bind and loose, we believe, as Catholics, I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible, that sins have both eternal and temporal consequences. So just like if you break a window as a child and you say you're sorry, your father forgives you, but you still have to make it up by repairing the window or paying for it out of your own pocket to repair the window.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you're forgiven, your father doesn't hold it against you. He's not going to, kill you because of the window, but you do have to make up the difference, right?
Yeah.
So the temporal consequences of sin makes us to where we're not, when we die, if we have unremitted temporal consequences of sin on our soul. So like sins, we've had habitual sins, say we've had problems with anger, and we've confessed them and we've been forgiven because of the atoning work of Christ on the cross. We're forgiven, so there's no eternal consequence to our sin. But Jesus said that if you don't make up with, if you don't make up with your brother on your way to the court, that you'll be held by the court until you pay the last penny.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the other parables he told where the guy owes like 500 talents or like some unbelievable amount that isn't payable, like a 50-year salary.
Yeah.
He says the word that he used, pays the last penny, is literally, it's like a day's wage,
Okay.
So it's a payable amount. So it's something you can actually do. And then he says also that blasphemy against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven in this life or in the age to come. So that says that there is forgiveness at some point. Somehow there's forgiveness in the age to come of certain things. Paul says in his letter to the Corinthians that every man builds up his works, some build in hay, straw, wood, gold, all different things. And every man's works will be tested as though through fire. And the good man will survive, but his works will be burnt up, if they're made out of straw, as passing through fire. So you're going to be tested through fire, and your works will be burned up. If they're good, they'll persist. If they're good works, if they're feeding the homeless and caring for the sick and hungry, they'll continue on with you into heaven. But if they're bad works, not mortal, so they're not deadly to the soul, because a mortal sin kills the life of God in your soul, right? It separates you from God. A venial sin just damages it. So if it's unremitting venial sin, or if it's temporal consequences of already forgiven sin, that's what purgatory is for. Purgatory means purgation. It means cleansing, because nothing unclean can enter heaven. We talked about before how C.S. Lewis said that if you were going to meet the king, and you say, let me get cleaned up first, and the attendant tells you, well, it might hurt. And you say, yes, but all the better that I might be scrubbed before I see the king. You want to be clean and presentable. Nothing impure can go to heaven. And I don't know about you, but I've known a lot of Christians that have died, and they didn't have halos around their head and angel wings when they died. They were Christians, and they believed in Jesus, and a lot of them were Catholic, and they received last rites and all that. But if they have these unremittent consequences, these temporal consequences, they need to be cleansed of this. And it's not a punishment. It's actually a mercy from God to have this cleansing. So that's what purgatory is. So an indulgence, to kind of wrap it all up, an indulgence is where, because you got to explain purgatory before you explain indulgence, or indulgence doesn't make sense. An indulgence is where the church, because they have the power to bind and loose, for certain reasons, certain actions, certain things, you can gain an indulgence to where if it's a plenary indulgence, it completely wipes the slate clean. So you don't have any consequences on your soul, any unremitting temporal consequences. Or if it's a partial indulgence, it's partial, as the name implies. And any indulgence you gain can be applied to you or to any person that's passed on, so that's in purgatory. You don't know if they're in purgatory or in heaven, just you pray for them anyway. But it can't be, you can't gain an indulgence for another living human. It doesn't work that way. So that's one of the restrictions on gaining an indulgence. Let me see here. So to gain, there's a few requirements on the Stations of the Cross indulgence. There's a lot of different indulgences you can gain, and there's actually an article during Holy Week. There's like 20 indulgences that are possible to be gained. Because there's all these different things to do during Holy Week. So during doing the Stations of the Cross, there's actually a few conditions to gain the plenary indulgence, and it has to be done before Stations of the Cross are legitimately erected. So you can't just do it in your house with indulgence. It has to be like at a church or somewhere where the church is set up, like outdoor ones or something. 14 stations are required, although it is customary for the icons to represent pictures or images. 14 simple crosses will suffice. 3, the common practice consists of 14 pious readings to which some vocal prayers are added. However, nothing more is required than a pious meditation on the passion and death of the Lord, which need not be a particular consideration of the individual mysteries. So you can just go around to each 14 stations and just think of the death of our Lord, and it doesn't have to be particular to each one. A movement from one station to the next is required, but if the stations are made publicly and it's not possible for everyone to move to the next station, it suffices at least that the one conducting the exercise goes from station to station, the others remain in their place. I've done this at, like on Good Friday at my parish, it's packed with Stations of the Cross, and so they'll have kind of a altar boy holding the crucifix, and a couple of altar boys with candles, and like either the deacon or the priest will go with them to each station, but everyone just kind of stands at their pews and turns and follows from the pews. So as long as the person conducting it goes from station to station. The last two are those impeded can gain the indulgence if they spend at least one. Those who are impeded, so they can't go to the house, can gain the same indulgence if they spend at least 1/2 hour in pious reading and meditation on the passion and death of our Lord Jesus Christ. So if someone's homebound and they can't get out, as long as they spend 30 minutes meditating on the passion of Jesus, they can gain the same indulgence. And then all the regular normal requirements for indulgence apply, that you have to be in a state of grace, so you have to have non-inhibition, and you have to do the action that the indulgence is talking about, and you have to pray for the intention of the Pope.
So speaking of the Pope, I think Pope Francis has said this every Lent, that we should be, participating in the Stations of the Cross. So what is his recommendation when it comes to this?
I don't know, the church recommends that we do it during Lent. My pastor actually asked everyone in the parish to come every Friday, but that isn't going to happen. Can't get everyone to come to Mass on Sunday. They're paying their penalty, a mortal sin, But a lot of people show up. I have to admit, I have not made it every Friday this Lent, so I am guilty. But it's definitely a good practice. It's good to do. And you can even do it, like I said, all throughout the year. It doesn't have to be during Lent. Lent is the traditional time to do the Station of the Cross. In Jerusalem, if you ever make it to Jerusalem, in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, every day at, I want to say it's 12 o'clock, the Franciscans do Stations of the Cross through the church. All through the church. And it ends up at Calvary. Like, actually, it goes up to the place of the crucifixion and stuff. And then on Fridays, they do one from Antonio Fortress, so the actual stations, like, through the city. Like, because when you're walking down the Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem, you'll be walking, you'll see a Roman numeral on the wall, and this is, like, where Jesus fell, and this place is, so it's the actual, we practice at our churches, this is the actual spots, and every Friday the Franciscans do the Stations of the Cross all the way across the city, and they carry this big wooden cross while they do it. So that's really, and that's year round. They do that all year.
So what is your last takeaway for, or last words, advice for anybody who wants to do the Stations of the Cross this year?
Wear comfortable shoes. Just go with spirit. Don't don't go just because it's Friday and that's what Catholics do on Friday during Lent. You know,
Yeah.
we eat fish and we pray the Stations of the Cross. You know, that's just what we do. And then your kid asks on Fridays, well, that's just the way we do, son. No, you're supposed to have a reason for, you have a reason for the hope that's in you. First Peter.
Yeah.
So we do the Stations of the Cross because it's a meditation on the death of Christ.
Yeah.
It go there with a prayerful mind, a prayerful mindset, and really put yourself in the scene. That's what I like to do. Put myself into the scene and do that, and it really changes from just being this somewhat medieval feeling practice of going around the church, standing and praying at each of the pictures around them, to actually a meditation on the death of Christ, and you're there with Christ watching you walk, and you're walking with him. You're a companion. You're going with him, because that's what a companion is, someone who goes with.
Yeah. Okay. So anything else? Because we covered quite a lot.
Yeah. Actually, today is my third anniversary. I don't know what you call it, Catholicversity.
Wow! Congratulations.
Yeah. I just noticed it came up on my phone today. Sometimes your phone will remind you, like 3 years ago today. It was pictures that I took at my confirmation or reception, I guess you call it. No, there should be an official word for that. Like, what is it?
Yeah. What do they call it here?
Confirmation anniversary? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it's been 3 years for me today, so I feel very blessed to be home.
Yeah. I'm glad you are, because you're now part of all of this ministries, and it's wonderful.
Right.
God is using you.
I'm doing things. That's what I said. I was talking to my priest, my parish priest, last night. I told you Father Leo Padaling was in town doing a parent Lent mission, and I'm actually doing a retreat, a men's retreat, in a couple of weeks at my parish.
Wow.
For based on the Mass,
Okay,
and I'm not a public speaker. I've only ever done it once or twice, and I feel like I'm going to die every time I'm doing it.
You're already a public speaker. You're on the podcast.
Right, yeah, I know, but I mean like a live audience makes it different.
Yeah.
And my Father Robert looked at me and said, "Oh, so you're doing the retreat in a couple of weeks, right?" I said, "Yeah, it's in a couple of weeks." He said, "Wow, you really, because I told him before that I'm not a public speaker." I said, "Well, I felt like I was kind of being pushed in this direction. And I seen what happened when Jonah resisted, so I figured I'd skip the whole whale part and just go for it." Because if I say no enough, I'm just going to say, I don't know where a whale would come in Arizona.
Yeah. But you don't want to be in that position. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'll just say yes. It's kind of short circuit the whole process. But yeah, it's I'm happy to be home. People say welcome home when you become Catholic.
Yeah.
And it used to feel weird when people would say it to me before I was while I was in RCIA. People would say welcome home. I would hear people say it on the radio and stuff, like a convert would call up to Catholic Answers Live and they'd say, well, I always thought it sounded weird, But then when I became Catholic, and that night at Easter Vigil 3 years ago tonight, I remember people saying to me, welcome home, as I was walking out of the church, and it felt like I was home.
Yeah.
It felt like your mother saying welcome home when you come home from after, when you were a kid and you come home after going out, and you're welcome home, son. And it felt like I was home.
So, welcome home, and hope you have a big celebration of this today. And and all the best with your retreat.
Thank you.
Which days it is? We will intercede for you during that time.
April 6th.